Coming up on 2020 on ID, a woman on her way home from a party.
I got out of the car, I could see bodies, and it was just, wow. I was in the middle of a nightmare.
Now the lives of two families are forever changed.
My brother came up to me and said, Jacob didn't make it.
A father has lost his son.
I missed you. I miss you too.
And a single mother faces years in prison for manslaughter.
She killed somebody. How do we hold her accountable?
A case that seems all but certain.
We're talking about a severely intoxicated woman who gets behind a wheel, drives, and causes someone to die.
An investigation under attack.
And that's when I found out that I had the motorcycle going the wrong direction.
And a daughter who watches and waits.
I told the Lord that I need my mom, and hopefully He'll send her home.
A story of hope, forgiveness, and an uncertain road ahead. Welcome to 2020 on ID. I'm John Quinones. Single mom Wendy Sue Anderson was driving home one night from a party. Suddenly, bright lights, a fatal crash. She admits she was drinking, but were there other factors that night? Are there things that might save her from going to prison and being taken away from her daughter? As Cynthia McFadden first reported in 2004, that night had tragic and lasting consequences for two families. And it all happened in a flash of a headlight.
I got out of the car and looked at the motorcycle inside my car. And down the road I could see bodies, and it was just, wow. I was in the middle of a nightmare.
Wendy Sue Anderson, a single mother, has spent 8 months in the Pima County Jail for her role in a traffic collision that happened on this quiet stretch of road outside of Tucson. On the afternoon of the crash, Wendy told her daughter she was going to a party.
My daughter was playing with the neighbor girl. I asked her if she wanted to go. Thank goodness she didn't.
She said that she was going to go to a party, and I knew that there was going to be drugs involved, or at least beer involved. So I said, Mom, could I just go to my next-door neighbor's house and play for a little bit?
Across town, Jacob Hotzenbuehler was climbing on the back of his father's motorcycle.
I picked Jacob up from school. He gets off at 8 o'clock, so I picked him up at 8 o'clock. We stopped at the Circle K right there, got some gas. Then I took off down the highway.
By then, Wendy was heading home from the party. About a mile from home, she had to make a left-hand turn at the crest of a small hill.
I don't know if I blacked out. I can't imagine myself blacking out. But I just don't remember past that point, halfway up that hill.
Right when I started into my turn, the last thing I remember is a headlight, and it was just right there. It's so fast. I can't remember. I mean, I saw the light, and that was it. It was like, phew.
She said that she was going to be home around 8 o'clock, and it got to be 9, around 10. So I was, like, really, really worried. I was, like, really scared that something had happened.
Wendy walked away with minor bruises, but the motorcycle riders were thrown over 70 feet.
When we were in the hospital, my brother came up to me and said, we're sorry, Jacob didn't make it.
Jacob was pronounced dead at the scene, and hours later, Wendy Sue Anderson was charged with manslaughter.
She killed somebody, an innocent 17-year-old. And what's the proper thing to do with regard to her? How do we hold her accountable?
Mark Diebold, the prosecutor on the case, says that because Wendy's blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit, she is responsible for Jacob's death.
If you believe and understand that she's a 244 blood alcohol concentration and he died as a result, then she's guilty of manslaughter. It's as simple as that.
This doesn't have to do with her, whether she was impaired or not.
Suzanne Crawford is the public defender assigned to the case. She says that whether Wendy was intoxicated or not, she was going under 10 miles an hour at the time of the crash and did not cause the accident.
This is about whose fault was it? There's a lot of evidence pointing away from Wendy and pointing at Lee Hotzenbuehler.
Crawford is hoping the jury will look at her client's blood alcohol level differently when they learn that Lee Hotzenbuehler and his son Jacob had traces of marijuana in their systems the night of the crash, that they weren't wearing helmets, and may have been speeding.
It's going to come down to what the jury believes, you know, and how they feel about Lee's impairment versus your recklessness, because any jury is going to believe that anybody with that alcohol level has some level of recklessness by just being on the road.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So, and it's going to be down to the argument of, well, you know, can we really point the blame on you?
I understand.
It's a rare case like this, where you've got this driver, the other driver, who's also under the influence.
Crawford realizes that in order to shift the blame to Hatzenbuehler, that she'll have to find as much evidence as possible that he was high at the time of the crash.
This is an interview with Deputy Donald Doyle.
Today, she's in Dieboldt's office, interviewing one of the first police officers on the scene.
Frankly, I'm curious to see the questions she's going to ask, because that will tell me, by her questioning, which path she's going down as far as defense.
You know, you're the lead investigative officer, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. During the course of your investigation, were you given any reason to believe that Lee Hatzenbuehler may have been under the influence of marijuana or any other kind of drug?
At the time of the collision, no.
Crawford also wants to know why the police at the scene tested Wendy for drugs and alcohol, but did not test Lee.
Is there any reason why he wasn't given a tox screen then at that point?
I had no reason to do a tox screen on him.
But it's pretty standard to test both drivers for these various substances, isn't it?
If there's a fatal involved, yes and no. It just depends.
They just made an assumption that she was responsible because she was impaired. She was responsible.
The defense is kind of try to take the focus off her and put the focus more on him. And I'm going to try to bring the focus back and say, listen, he's not on trial. The deceased is not on trial, and the dad driving the motorcycle is not on trial.
Diebold would like to call Lee Hatzenbuehler as a witness, but knows that he is suffering from serious head injuries sustained in the crash. So he decides that it is time to go meet him.
My concern is, how is he going to present to the jury? I have to decide when I see him. Is he going to help me? Is he going to hurt me? Hey, Mark Diebold, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing okay.
Nice to meet you. Somewhere in the back of your head, I want you to at least think about the possibility that I have to call you in on a certain day to testify.
You know, and I have thought about that so many times. And because my life is ruined, I don't want to ruin her baby's life. And so I have a mixed emotion about this.
Now, this is the part I want to talk to you a little bit about. When you were taken to the hospital to be checked out, they took your blood, and your blood was tested, and it came back with marijuana in the system. Okay. Were you smoking a lot back around that time frame, or every day?
No. I don't never smoke a lot. It's an occasional thing, you know.
If I were to ask you the best of your recollection, were you straight on that day, or were you under the influence? Did you smoke a joint before you got on the motorcycle?
Oh, no.
He's honest. He's sincere. I think for the state to prove its case, he's a necessary witness.
Diebold thinks that Lee Hatzenbuehler would make a sympathetic witness, but knows his marijuana use could still pose problems. So he goes to see his supervisor for advice.
I've got marijuana in the system of both the dead son and the father.
What kind? What do you got?
What specifically? THC?
Carboxy THC or THC? One can be an inactive metabolite with no psychoactive effects.
Which one's that?
Carboxy THC.
I knew that.
Diebold is learning that there's a big difference between active THC, which affects the brain for a couple of hours, and inactive traces of THC, which remain in the bloodstream for 30 days.
If it's not acting on him, why should it be admissible?
After doing his homework, Diebold realizes that because the police at the scene did not immediately test Lee Hatzenbuehler's blood, there is no conclusive proof that he was high at the time of the crash. His blood was drawn at the hospital, but not tested until months later, long after the active ingredient marijuana would have left the sample.
See, Bruce thinks.
Because there's no definite proof that Hatzenbuehler was high at the time of the crash, Diebold files a motion asking the judge to rule that the defense not be allowed to introduce any evidence about the traces of marijuana found in his blood.
The court is going to grant the state's motion to preclude the presence of the marijuana metabolites in the blood system. as the unfair prejudice outweighs any little appropriate value. Seems
The
like
judge agrees with Diebold and rules that no evidence about the marijuana use could come in.
I can't believe that he just doesn't even think it's relevant. I mean, I had very specific case law on that marijuana issue. It floors me that he doesn't think it's relevant. It's hard to stomach that she's getting a fair trial. I don't think she's getting a fair trial. I want you to be realistic with yourself, okay? Because I don't want you to crash here if we don't win. For your own sanity and your own expectation and Rachel's, hope for the best. But in this system, you almost have to expect the worst.
When we come back, prosecutors prepare their case against Wendy Sue Anderson. But could a major snag derail them?
She wrote a letter to the judge. She said anybody who would cheat on his wife would crunch numbers for money.
And an explosive outburst as the trial begins.
My son's killed. She came here, killed me, and she's still up to life.
Stay with us. Wendy Sue Anderson has spent almost a year in custody awaiting trial. As the date draws near, she welcomes a moment of calm before the storm. Once again, Cynthia McFadden.
Wendy Anderson's mother, Carol, and daughter, Rachel, are arriving at the Pima County Jail for their weekly Saturday visit.
Sometimes I think about her not coming home and what it's going to be like to not see my mom for that period of time. I don't think that I'm going to get over that quickly if she doesn't come home.
Hello.
Hi.
There we go.
Look at your hair.
You like it?
Yeah, it's pretty.
I'm sorry you got to go through this.
It's all right.
No, it's not, but thank you for doing it.
Since her arrest, Wendy's mother has been caring for Rachel.
I just hope you don't get transferred to another jail. Then we won't be able to see you as often. It's been really difficult without a father and a mother to take care of me. I think my life is very different from everybody else's.
Since she was very young, Rachel has had to cope with her mother's drinking.
I learn about all the dangers of smoking and drinking in school, and I'm like, Mom, you gotta stop.
You know, probably most mothers would sit and cry and cry and cry, you know, for their daughter to get out. But the thing that I was most concerned with was that she stays someplace long enough so that she does never want to take another drink again.
Since she's been in prison, Wendy's been attending weekly AA meetings, and for the first time in years, is sober.
It hurts not having my family here, but I know that I feel that this is bettering my life. It was something that I think needed to happen to me.
Anyways, I love you.
I love you more.
Whatever. I pray every night that she's gonna come home. I told the Lord that I need my mom, and hopefully He'll send her home.
Because Wendy's lawyer, Susan Crawford, cannot introduce any evidence about the traces of marijuana found in Lee Hotzenbuehler's blood or the fact that he was not wearing a helmet, she is left to argue that Hotzenbuehler was responsible only because of excessive speed.
The motorcycle was absolutely embedded in Wendy's car. I mean, it just was embedded. And so the speed of that motorcycle is really important.
To establish the speed of the motorcycle, she hires retired police detective Larry Cripes and his team of experts to examine the vehicles and reconstruct the accident.
All she wanted to do was turn left, and she ran into a situation where, this was pretty overwhelming. I think it would be to anybody in that situation.
The prosecution says that Wendy caused the crash because she was so drunk that she veered into the wrong lane 30 feet before her turn home. But Larry's calculations seem to support what Wendy's been saying all along, that she was making a proper left-hand turn when the motorcycle riders emerged from this dip in the road at such a high speed that she had no time to react.
They're a major factor in this collision. Their behavior is a major factor in this collision. And I don't think anybody can ignore that. When you take the sum total of what's going on, she's a victim too.
what they're trying to do is put the crash site up around this cluster, which is up here, which is more consistent with what their theory is going to be, is she's making a proper left turn. He's hauling ass down the road. She's doing a normal turn like she's done 100 times. Doesn't see him because he's going so fast. So they're really trying to figure out, how do they get the collision site up around here? Because we've got it down here.
The challenge for the defense is to explain to the jury why, if the crash happened at the intersection, was Wendy's car found some 30 feet down the road.
The motorcycle basically, if you could see it in slow motion, it probably went up to almost 90 degrees as it hit. And as they come off the ground, the car starts a roll aspect because it's now being violently thrown back in a counterclockwise rotation.
And what they're trying to say is this motorcycle moved this 2,500-pound car, a 740-pound motorcycle moved it, what, however many feet. Nobody's going to buy that.
But Crawford is hoping that the jury might buy it when they discovered that the prosecution's reconstructionist made mistakes.
Susan Crawford, interview with Marty Fuentes, reconstructionist. Mark's case has problems. One is his reconstructionist, Marty Fuentes. Marty.
Yes.
You at some point took a look at your first report.
Correct.
And you saw that there were some errors.
Oh, yeah. And that's when I found out that I had the motorcycle going the wrong direction.
Okay.
It was a very simple error.
Crawford knows that this particular error
stuff,
may be the least of his problems.
Some time ago, a letter was sent to the judge from Wendy Sue Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She made an allegation that she knew you from a previous life, so to speak. She wrote a letter to the judge, and basically she said anybody who would cheat on his wife would crunch numbers for money.
The letter strongly implies that Wendy had an affair with Fuentes. If this is the case, then it would be a serious conflict of interest, which might make him seem much less credible to a jury.
For your detective to potentially have had a relationship, an intimate relationship, with the defendant, it's a very unusual situation.
So to the date, you still do not recall having had a relationship with this woman?
No. I'd have to see her face to face and talk to her for a bit, and maybe things will jiggle, but I just don't.
Okay. All right.
Detective.
3 days later, Diebold gets a call from Detective Fuentes, whose memory has improved.
Listen, you don't got to explain anything to me. I just want to know I understand the deal. He says there may have been a woman who was more petite at the time and younger, obviously, that he may have known for a couple months.
First thing on Monday morning, Wendy Sue Anderson is transferred to a holding cell in the courthouse to await the start of her trial.
I got my mom's pearls on. I wear them for every trial.
American flag, red, white, blue. Short haircut, just got a little trim, $8 trim over the weekend, just a little.
All rise. This court is again in session. The Honorable Judge Kempy presiding.
The first day is devoted to jury selection, and by 4 in the afternoon, the judge is ready to seat the panel.
Raise your right hands, please. Do you each of you swear to God or
This is the jury of her peers, 6 women and 8 men. Among them, a bank teller, a legal assistant, a postal supervisor, and a teacher.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mark Diebold, and I'm the prosecutor in this case. The defendant drank enough alcohol to get to a .244 blood alcohol concentration. We're talking about a severely intoxicated woman here who gets behind a wheel, drives, and causes someone to die. That's manslaughter. And at a .244, ladies and gentlemen, that's as reckless as it gets.
There is nothing I can stand before you and tell you about this case that makes it any less sad and tragic. Blame and fault do nothing to grief and loss.
In the middle of Crawford's opening arguments, Diebold's detective noticed that Lee Hotzenbuehler has surfaced in the back of the courtroom.
Wendy Anderson is not to blame. The evidence you will hear in this trial will establish that.
They start with one question: is there alcohol involved? They start and they stop there. They say, well, she's impaired, and gee, the car is in the wrong way, and she turned in front of the motorcycle. She's responsible. She's to blame. And she's not. They label her right there.
My son was killed. She came here, killed me, and she's still alive.
Take a brief recess.
Okay.
Can we?
At this time, ladies and gentlemen, while I take a brief recess, I'll have the bailiff escort you out of the courtroom.
Jurors are sworn to make a decision based on the law and not emotion. And Crawford fears that the victim's outburst will make it impossible for this jury to be fair to Wendy.
I got something to say to the jury.
Counsel.
And I think it's appropriate this time to move for a mistrial.
The court's going to grant the defense motion for a mistrial. We're going to reset this for trial again. And I caution you at the next trial not to engage in these types of outbursts. So with that, I'll go ahead and excuse you, and thank you again for your participation.
All right. Sorry. I know you were ready for this, too. That's okay. We'll do it again.
Because of Hudson Bueller's outburst, Wendy, who has spent 9 months in jail awaiting trial, will have to wait at least 3 more months for a new one.
When we come back, the new trial begins, and eyewitnesses recall a horrific scene.
The older gentleman that was off in the ravine was flipping and flopping around. He was just screaming in agony, basically.
Stay with us.
2 days before Wendy Sue Anderson's retrial, her daughter Rachel and mother Carol came for what they hope will be their last Saturday morning visit.
I like your jacket.
Thank you.
How's school going?
Good.
You liking Spanish?
Yeah. There was this really cute guy, but you don't have to worry about him. He'd never go out with me.
Wendy has now been apart from Rachel for close to a year.
I think of her as my little girl, and she's not a little girl anymore. She's a young lady.
I love you.
Love you too.
I miss you.
Miss you too. I pray every night that she's gonna come home, and hopefully that dream will come true very soon.
All rise. This court is again in session. The Honorable Judge Kempthey presides.
It's 3 months after the mistrial, and a new jury has been seated for Wendy's retrial. Among them, an architect, an engineer, and 3 teachers.
Reckless behavior is what brings us here today, ladies and gentlemen.
Once again, they start their openings. This time, Diebold has told Lee Hudson Bueller not to come to court, and Crawford hopes to get through her opening statement without interruption.
The government here says that Wendy Sue Anderson is responsible for this accident. The science of accident reconstruction will tell you that she is not. This investigation is so grossly, obviously biased that at the end of this trial, when I ask you to find Wendy Sue Anderson not guilty, you will have no other choice but to do so. Thank you.
And with that, the state and call its first witness.
Take your state calls Bill Carter.
Bill Carter was walking down Trico Road on the night of the accident.
Did you see the car prior to the car hitting the motorcycle?
Yes, I did. It went by us, and I ran down to the accident.
And when you got there, what did you see?
Well, when I first got there, there was a younger male laying in the middle of the road that wasn't breathing, and then the older gentleman that was off in the ravine was flipping and flopping around, and I tried to get him to lay still, and he was just screaming in agony, basically.
Did you see that motorcycle push that car down the road after the collision?
No. No.
That's all the questions I have for this witness.
She had slurred speech. She was unstable on her feet.
I could smell a strong odor of intoxicants from her mouth.
The vehicle smelled of alcohol.
After calling witnesses to establish Wendy's blood alcohol level and condition at the scene,
Diebold turns to perhaps his most important witness, his new accident reconstructionist, Tim Mobis, who has been called in to replace Marty Fuentes.
Through the calculations that I did, I concluded that the operator of the motorcycle really had no chance to avoid the collision.
And to convince a jury that he had no chance, Mobis starts with a detail from one of the photos taken at the crash scene.
Here you can see dirt and dust and debris underneath the vehicle. Because all of that debris and evidence is really right under the vehicle, I concluded that the point of impact is, very near the rest positions.
If the collision did happen where the vehicles came to rest, then it would be impossible for the jury to believe the defense's argument that Wendy was making a proper turn and was pushed 30 feet by the force of the impact.
You'd actually have to have the motorcycle doing 134 miles per hour. It's ridiculous.
We'll go ahead and take our evening recess. We'll start up again tomorrow at 10:30.
Mobis is Diebold's final witness. Crawford will start her defense tomorrow.
I think I'll sleep better tonight than Crawford. And I think she knows tomorrow's a critical day.
Let's face it, I don't have a chance. I'm acting as if we do and hoping that we do. But over here, I just don't think that we do.
Does the defense wish to call any witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, we'll call Marty Fuentes.
Crawford's first witness is the man the state did not want the jury to hear from, accident reconstructionist Marty Fuentes.
Sir, after submitting your first report, the issue arose that there was a conflict of interest in this case. Is that right?
Yes.
And, sir, isn't it true that the conflict of interest in this case is the fact that you had an affair with Miss Anderson some years ago?
Counsel, from my advice from my attorney, I am going to institute my constitutional rights and not answer that.
You're invoking your Fifth Amendment rights?
Yes, ma'am.
I have nothing further.
The defense's case is now in the hands of accident reconstructionist Larry Cripes. He will have to convince the jury that Wendy was making a legal turn when she was blindsided by a speeding motorcycle.
Why don't you now, if you will, explain to the jury what conclusions you came to as to how this accident came about?
At impact, the motorcycle is impaled into the front of the vehicle. The vehicle is rotated back on its rear wheels. And the rear wheels on a Honda, in this case, are freewheeling. If you take them into a garage and put them up on a lift, you can just spin them. So as this vehicle impacts, rotates upward, it creates a torque moment, which basically is like kind of stepping on a roller skate. It pushes it backwards. Both vehicles rotate to final rest.
Cripes thinks that the force was great enough to push her from the intersection 30 feet to where the police found the vehicles. But he still has to explain to a jury why all the dirt and debris ended up where the state says the crash occurred.
Whatever dirt is dislodged is moving at the speed and has to gravity drop. So you're going to see most of the dirt around where the vehicles end up in a high-speed collision.
In sum, what are the ranges of speeds that you put these vehicles at?
With the motorcycle riding on the top of the car, the high speed or the high end could be around 92 miles per hour.
Larry Cripe wants you to believe this thing happened 31 and a half feet from here. Look at the debris around this. I'm going to put in a plastic baggie all the pieces of evidence, items that were found where Larry Cripe thinks this collision happened. That's it. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. I want you to remember why you're here. You're here because the defendant was reckless, and you have a duty to hold her accountable. And you've got a duty to hold her responsible for her criminal acts. And that's why you've been selected to sit on this jury. Thank you for your time.
If you have a reasonable doubt, that's enough to find her not guilty. If you have some reasonable doubt about how and where the collision occurred,
Do you have some reasonable doubt about the speed? The benefit of all these doubts goes to the defendant in our system. When you go back into deliberations, I think there's plenty of information for you to find reasonable doubt. And I ask that you find Wendy Sue Anderson not guilty.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the closing arguments.
Wendy's fate is now in the hands of the jury.
As the jury goes into deliberations, there's one thing that's certain about the Wendy Sue Anderson case. She was legally drunk when she got in her car and crashed into a motorcycle, killing Jacob Hatzenbuehler. But are there other factors the jury will consider? And can they come to an agreement? Once again, Cynthia McFadden.
It's day one of jury deliberations.
Does anybody have any thoughts on how we should start? Has anybody been through this before?
Yeah, I've been through it once before.
Do you want to be the Any objections?
You're
to being
appointed.
the foreman?
No, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Okay, you're appointed. You're it.
You're the foreman.
Wendy has been brought from the jail to wait in a holding cell just down the hall from the jury room.
This could be my last morning waking up there. I could be home tomorrow.
I've been having dreams a lot lately that she's coming home, so I think that those are signs that she's coming, and I pray that that's true.
And I'm pretty sure of my decision already, but I'd like to know what other people's impression is. In regards to point A being the point of the accident, what are the opinions on that?
Point A is the intersection where the defense says the crash occurred.
My position, I don't believe A was the point of the accident. It just doesn't jive with a couple of the other issues in my mind. But quite frankly, I don't really care whether it was A or B. My gut feeling is it was reckless regardless, and that goes right back to the alcohol.
I cannot believe that it happened here and the car flew back 30 feet. The numbers don't add up to me. I definitely think it happened back here and that she was making her turn too early.
Miles from the courthouse, Lee Hatzenbuehler waits for the jury's verdict.
I wouldn't want to be in her shoes. And I don't know which end of the stick is shittier, her end or my end. Because, as much pain as I feel, I'm sure that she is probably feeling just as much.
Oh, it's gonna be the slowest day.
I just think she was too out of it to really even realize that there was an oncoming vehicle and just turned right into it. I really believe that.
There's two things that count. Manslaughter because she was on the wrong side of the road. Reckless because she was drunk. So it's reckless manslaughter. That's it.
I agree. Do you care whether it was A or B?
I don't care A, B, C, or D, or where the dirt was, or any of the damn thing. She was on the wrong side of the road, and she was drunk. And that's reckless manslaughter.
As they go around the table, they all seem to be in agreement until they come to Rhonda, who works in the kitchen of an elementary school.
It's not my turn yet, but I'm going to speak up. Okay, how does the car get turned?
After the impact.
Right. So couldn't it have pushed it a ways? If it was going so fast? It could have been moved, don't you think?
Are you trying to lend credence to the fact that it happened at point B, C, and that it did actually move this 31 feet?
I'm kind of thinking on A. It's true. That
For
they
what?
did impact and it pushed that car. That car isn't that heavy.
Okay.
Does that make a difference to you about who you believe caused this accident?
I believe both of them are in the wrong.
They have to be unanimous to reach a verdict. If not, it will be a hung jury and another mistrial.
We have 12 different individuals, 12 different personalities, 12 different lifestyle and experiences. And so all the defense needs is one person who buys into the confusion, one person that's mystified by the smoke and mirrors.
You guys,
If you're
there's
adding
two
things-
sides to every story. I just can't see all of her in the blame for it.
A hung jury is always a victory. It means she's not guilty. It means she has not been rendered guilty. And it means I've done something successful.
When that motorcycle hits the car and goes up, wouldn't it raise the front end of the whole car hard up in the air, and it would coast on those back wheels because they're not rear-wheel drive.
Exactly.
And it could go scooting down the side.
Exactly.
This is a thought.
That's exactly what Kripe said. That was his testimony.
And when the thing came down, it left all the dirt and stuff on.
Yeah.
That's possible. I'm not saying I believe that, but that's possible.
Well, that was Kripe's
That's
argument.
what I'm looking at. If they did the crime scene right, they would have took pictures of everything the next day.
Yeah.
They were already determined. This DUI, she's wrong.
Mark,
Yes, dear.
they're going to break for lunch at noon to 1.
As they break for lunch, there's still at least one person standing between Wendy and a guilty verdict.
When we come back, a vote seals Wendy Sue Anderson's fate.
They made a decision? God give me grace.
And an emotional Lee Hatzenbuehler finally addresses the court. His surprising remarks.
On behalf of my son, Jacob.
Stay with us. Despite the expert testimonies and the diagrams, nothing that either the prosecution or the defense has laid out in court has given the jury a clear-cut case. And the jury has been divided, sometimes heatedly. But now they must follow their gut. It's time to vote on Wendy Sue Anderson's fate. Once again, Cynthia McFadden.
Well, I think we ought to vote.
He wants to just get it over with, doesn't he? These guys are in a hurry. They're already made their mind up. I want to see everything. I don't want to be down the road feeling guilty that I made the wrong decision.
When she drank what she drank, and then she got in the car and drove, that's the point at which I say that was when she acted recklessly. It wasn't when she turned left, or whether she turned left correctly or incorrectly. It was the decision to get in the car and drive.
Everybody that lives nowadays knows that you don't drink and drive. So it's not like she's been kept sheltered and didn't know there was a risk of drinking and driving.
Well, even that's not an excuse.
You can't think about what the penalty is going to be for her. We're not here to decide that.
Well, I know that.
So we have to say, did she knowingly get in that car after drinking however many beers? It doesn't matter. She's been drinking. Did she get behind that wheel knowing that she had the intent to injure somebody?
Even if she didn't stagger.
She
Her
had that
alcohol
blood.
was huge.
Right.
Yeah, that right there.
And she got behind the wheel and she drove.
There can't be any question. She was drunk.
Yeah.
You just cannot be.
Are we ready to vote?
Are you ready to vote?
Yep.
This is on the manslaughter. All those who would vote for guilty on this, raise your hand.
Oh.
So I see 12 hands.
County Attorney Diebold.
Mark, this is Abby.
Hi, Abby.
Jury's reached a verdict.
Yes. Okay, thank you. That was too fast.
We need to give for your verdict, Ms. Anderson.
They made a decision? God give me grace.
All rise. This court is again in session.
Will you hand the verdict forms to the bailiff, please? Will the clerk please read and record the verdicts?
We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn in the above entitled action, upon our oaths, do find the defendant, Wendy Sue Anderson, guilty of the offense of manslaughter as alleged in count 1 of the indictment.
The defendant be held without bond pending sentencing. That then stand in recess.
We will file appeal for you. We will be filing appeal for you. But that's a long process, all right? I can tell you he's not going to overturn the verdict because he's already ruled on that.
Well, can't we get another judge?
No, we can't get another judge.
Oh, my mom.
Okay, listen. Now, okay, be careful. You don't want to be hauled out of here. Okay, we'll talk to her, all right? Do you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you.
Okay, all right. So I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Wendy Anderson has fired Suzanne Crawford and brought on another lawyer to handle her sentencing.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask the court to allow the victim, Lee Hatzenbuehler, to address the court. He's prepared to do so at this time. Just tell him your name. Speak loudly, they can hear you.
My name is Lee Hatzenbuehler. I'm speaking on behalf of my son, Jacob. My son, Jacob, is dead. I guess some would say that it was probably an accident, and I don't deny that. Maybe it may very well have been. But I would like to say that I don't wish to have Miss Anderson spend the rest of her life in jail, because I don't feel that that does anybody any good. And certainly that won't bring Jacob back. I don't know what else to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. It's the judgment of the court that with respect to count 1, the defendant be imprisoned for the presumptive term of 10.5 years. Starting today's date, he'll be receiving credit for 410 days pre-sentence incarceration. With that, then, we'll stand in recess.
Wendy Sue Anderson was released from prison in 2011 after serving 9 years of her sentence. As of 2013, she was living in Tucson, working at a restaurant while studying for an associate's degree in computer networking. She told us she remains sober and will always acknowledge the pain of the Hatzenbuehler family. She remains close to her daughter, Rachel. Lee Hatzenbuehler says he still suffers from headaches and memory loss as a result of the accident and brain surgery. While he said he still misses his son, he also told us he does not harbor any ill will toward Wendy Sue. I'm John Quinones. Please join us next time for another edition of 2020 on ID.